All right, recording has started. Welcome to the first dev call of 2024. We have some shipped stuff to show you. So very first on the agenda, Horsefax is going to give, well, we shipped sign in with Farcaster and Authkit. So sign in with Farcaster is a standard, like sign in with Google. It lets you log in using a Farcaster account, but does not give you any permissions over the account. So you can just validate that someone logging in is Dan Romero or Horsefax and nothing else. We also shipped Authkit, which is a set of React libraries and JavaScript NPM packages that would make it easy for you to integrate this in any application that you have. And Horsefax is going to do a quick demo of the latest and greatest with sign-in and Farcaster and Authkit. Let me see if I can stop screen sharing. There we go.
Cool. Yeah, here we go. All right, yeah, so as Bryn said, we launched last week Authkit, which is a React library, so React hooks and React components if you're building in React. You can find docs for this if you go to the Farcaster doc site. Just click up here for Authkit, and you'll find the documentation for both Authkit, which is the React and React components library, and Auth client, which is a separate library. If you're not building on React, but you are building in TypeScript, you can use this internal Auth client library to build your own integration. So sort of like WAGME and VM, we've kind of followed that same principle in terms of designing these separate apps. So documentation for all of those packages is in here. You can find some demos in here and examples. There's one here that's just a Vite client-side app, one here that shows how to integrate with NextAuth if you have both a server-side API and you're using Next.js. So please check out this doc site. If you have questions or suggestions or things that could be clearer here, please reach out to me on Farcaster, reach out in the dev chat, or reach out on Telegram. Yeah, let's take a quick look at a demo here. So here's an example using Vite. With the Authkit library, we export, much like using RainbowKit, a sign-in button up here. So that's this component. This is what is provided by this library. We've just rendered this here in this little example demo app. Click this to sign in, and this will prompt you to scan a QR code with your phone. Got my device here. So let's pull this over. Here's my phone. So just like signing into Warpcast, scan that QR code, open it up in Warpcast, and you'll get a prompt to sign in with your profile information. Tap that to sign in. On my device, I can return to Warpcast, keep scrolling, and over here on the app, I am logged in. So you see my profile data up here, and the Authkit package provides some hooks as well that you can use to read basic information about the user profile. So this down here, we're reading my username, my FID, some other information about me from the response using those hooks. And we've had some good suggestions from folks who are already building on this to maybe add some additional data in there, like your connected address and your verified addresses. So you can get sort of basic information about the user, and then from here you can, you can treat them as authenticated in your application. So if you're building with an API server, at this point you might exchange this logged in identity for a token on your API backend. If you're building just purely on the front end, at this point they're authenticated in the app, and you can use those hooks to check whether the user is logged in and authenticated and read their Farcaster identity. Yeah, so check these out, docs.farcaster.xyz. Ping me on Farcaster if you're building on this, if you have any questions, if you run into any trouble.
Great, thanks for that demo, Horsefax. Let me claim the screen again, and then we can keep going. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions about the demo that Horsefax just showed? Going once, going twice.
Can I just like maybe ask like a Bill or I don't know if Woj was on the call, but like, people have complained in the past of like, oh, I have to connect again and pay 99 cents. So are we planning to upgrade to this just so that it's like the super slick, sign in with OAuth type flow? And if not, it would be good to understand what might be a blocker there.
Yeah, I mean, it is on our roadmap to do that. And in fact, you already integrated it on the web version of Bura. But we're going to do it on the app as well.
Great.
Awesome. So next, the next steps for sign in with Farcaster, we also want to do connect with Farcaster. So this exists today. This is the flow that gives you permissions to write on behalf of a user, which write apps like Supercast use today. It's called the sign in request flow, but we're rebranding it to connect with Farcaster. And it works the same way as when you connect your Google account to Slack or any of these other things that gives you permissions for one app to integrate and post to the other application. We'll take the same approach where there'll be a standard that makes it very easy for all of this to work using the same principles that sign in with Farcaster has. And we'll expand AuthKit so that there are React components that you can just drop in and that handle the flow for you. So no more building your own flow unless you really, really want to do it yourself. Cool. We'll have a design doc out about that in case folks have any feedback or questions. But barring that, we'll keep moving down the agenda. So next up is residual storage. Sanjay, if you're on the call, do you want to give the quick overview of this FIP?
Yeah, so at a high level, basically, we want to give users without any storage or with expired storage some amount of like residual storage. Like so, for example, like 10 user data add messages, a few verifications, and some amount of casts and links and reactions. On links, we might give them like a lot more. The main reason for this is like it gives you it's better for the network. It preserves some of the more important and hard to regenerate content. You don't want to be filling up your profile again the next time you sign up and pay for storage. And it's nice to have your follows preserved. The main impact would be the hubs have somewhat additional like storage requirements. But based on my estimates, and I will fill this out later today, it's not that bad. It works out to roughly about 25 to 30 KB per user with residual storage.
Yeah. So the context for this, as Sanjay mentioned, is on August 29th, 2024, a bunch of storage units are going to expire for all the people that we migrated over from the beta. And after that, many, many more units will expire as people hit their 1-year mark. Some folks will forget to renew. Some folks will want to renew and do it later. And so one of the things that the original design, we said, hey, we're just going to expire this data. It's just going to go blank. And the user has to remember to renew, being prompted by the apps, and they have to refill the data. And the reason for this was at the time, we weren't sure how well hubs were going to perform. And so we wanted to make sure that there wasn't any vector to spam or drop a bunch of additional data on hubs. Now, fast forward, 3 or 4 months, hubs have actually been working extremely well. There's about 600 of them. Storage has been actually far more efficient than we even thought it would be. And so we're in a very good place where we can offer a better UX. And the thing that Sanjay is proposing is saying, hey, if your storage expires, fine, we'll trim your casts, we'll trim your reactions, but let's preserve some of the harder to refill things that are actually valuable for the rest of the network, like your profile. So when people happen to come across somewhere where you interacted with somebody, it's not just an empty account and you don't have to fill it again. And also your follows, so that if you forget to renew it and you come back in a month or two and set up your account, you don't have to go and reestablish your entire following, which is super painful to do, and remember how to do this. So as long as hubs are efficient, we want to be a little more generous with the storage, giving expired accounts a little bit of storage so that they can come back and renew more easily. With the caveat that if we get a lot of users, we get a lot of demand, and this becomes difficult, we might go dial this back or potentially even reverse this proposal entirely if hubs are actually struggling to stay up and store data. In terms of what will be preserved, so the rules will be just the same as what it is today. So, if you buy storage, you have 1,000 casts, it'll store your most recent 1,000 casts, et cetera, et cetera. The limits specifically, we have a rough proposal here of 25, 25, 110, but Sanjay is actually doing a bunch of data analysis today to figure out what we can safely allow. So we will know a little bit more about that once all of that is set up. Yes, Greg, to answer your question, it's the former. It's you need to rent storage during registration. But once it expires, like once you've actually paid for it, we preserve a bunch of data on expiration. So it's primarily for the users that hit that expiration mark. Yeah, exactly. Sinara from Faithful had this comment of like, hey, if you actually have a DApp and you're still trying to connect to an account and the user is expired, you still have the profile data that the person last set to be able to just know their Farcaster names and addresses and all of that stuff. Okay, any last questions before we move on? So this is still a work in progress. We're likely gonna change a bunch of these numbers as we do the data analysis, but it is a very backwards compatible change. We can ship it today, but it will have actually no impact until August 29th when the first storage units expire. So it'll just go out in a minor update. Nothing will change until August 29th. And then some accounts that don't renew will get, actually September 29th, because technically everyone gets a 1-month grace period. So September 29th is the first day that this will actually start to do have an impact on the network. Okay, great. Coming back to the agenda. Next item, this one's hopefully very non-controversial, but we are proposing reducing the storage price of 1 year's worth of storage from $5 to $3, and details are here in the proposal. So rationale for this is back when we first launched the protocol release, we said, hey, we have no idea what the storage patterns are going to be, so let's actually have an aggressive schedule where we jump the price up to prevent people from spamming the network. That actually worked reasonably well. We got a bunch of signups, and then we said, okay, hubs are working fine. Let's continue operating at this scale. Then back in the Giraffe release in December, we said, let's drop the price from 7 to 5 and see if it does anything to demand or spam. Things have been going pretty well. And so we want to propose dropping the price of registration again from $5 to $3. The primary purpose of this free is just to prevent spam. We know that once this gets sub $1, sub cents, people start squatting accounts, and that's not good for the network. But at somewhere between the like $1 to $5 mark seems to be the right price point. And so we were proposing cutting the price again and saying that we'll keep the price here until we either hit 300,000 units. So for some reason, registration spiked like crazy, we'll revisit it, or we'll revisit it at the next protocol release, which is going to be in, this is applying for the February one, and then the next one will be in March. So we'll revisit it by then. Okay, did I put 2023 somewhere? Oh yeah, whoops. Let's fix this live. There's a little copy pasting going on here. All right. Any thoughts on changing the mix? It's a good question, Brightman. Sanjay is actually doing a little bit of analysis for the previous spec, which might influence our thinking here. So a couple of thoughts on this. We actually want, like, there's two things you can optimize for, right? Is like, how do you optimize to minimize what expires? Or how do you optimize to maximize value for the network? And those things don't always align. Reactions, for example, they're actually not that valuable. Like, you go back to a cast from a year, like very few people are browsing casts from years ago, and they're not really looking at reactions, and they're not that valuable. They're kind of valuable in the moment when you want to boost things in algo feeds and whatnot. Followers, on the other hand, are super valuable. When you follow someone, you get really annoyed if you hit the limit and they get expired. It's super, super disruptive when you follow somebody and that happens. Apps have to do a bunch of work to get it done. A follow is not only valuable for the person, it's also valuable for the person being followed. And so we also have this codification of like, hey, the most important thing we want to preserve is we want to make sure people are losing as few follows as possible, because that is actually explicit person-to-person interaction. Right after that, it's profile data, which I think we're in fine shape because there's only a limited set of things you can do. And then after that is casts, and then finally reactions. So those are the two constraints that we're trying to balance as we come up with these limits. Not just saying, hey, we want to preserve as much as possible, but we want to preserve what is most valuable for the network to be successful. But to answer your direct question, we are thinking of changing the mix, and we'll probably, once we do the passive data for this residual storage, we may come back with some thoughts if we think a better mix would drive more follows to be preserved on the network. Cool. Any other questions? All right, great. The other thing, and we launched this over the break, so it's not necessarily new, but this hasn't been talked about since the last protocol meeting, but we redid the docs.farcaster.xyz website, all the content, all the examples. There's a lot more stuff in here. So there are three main sections. There's this learn section, which you land on, which teaches you about how the network works. More relevant for this group is the developer section, where there are now a bunch of tutorials for all kinds of things, from establishing like setting up a name, creating messages, creating casts, creating verifications. There's snippets of code in a bunch of places, and there's even examples for some of these more complicated things. There's even more advanced tutorials about using the replicator and so on. So would love folks' feedback on this, and in particular, if there are any missing tutorials that you have struggled with in the past or that you are currently struggling with, that would be extremely helpful for us to know. The other sections talk about AuthKit. So there's a deeper dive into AuthKit, a deeper dive into Hubble and how you can set up your own Hubble instance. And then a reference page, which actually is less of a developer guide and more of a API spec, which actually lists out all of the APIs that Farcaster supports. And we've actually started adding some Warpcast APIs in here as well, things that people are relying on, just so that we have all the documentation in one place that people can use. So this is kind of the reference site for everyone to use. Okay, awesome. Any questions or comments on this? Great. We're going to keep going down the list. Farcon. So wanted to call out farcon.xyz is live. Would love to see many of y'all in person. Ted and McBain are organizing this event with a bunch of input from folks in the community. So just wanted to give a little plug for Farcon out here. Dan, anything you wanted to add on this?
No, I went to Farcon last year. It was great. I think this year it might even be better in terms of it'll be probably a little bit bigger. There's and kind of more events and more developer oriented stuff in terms of the hackathon. So any feedback from the developer side of things of what would be useful or other things we could be thinking about, like it's a good time to kind of surface that. My recommendation would be to do that in the FC dev channel on Farcaster. And just any suggestions that are kind of like a little bit more dev oriented for Farcon would be great. Because I view it as it's kind of like an unconference in the sense that there could be other events or other kind of things off to the side. If it's really about getting everyone together in person, or as many people as we can in person. And I haven't met a lot of you, so I would love to see as many of you show up if you possibly can. And I think I offered to do 5 sponsorships through Purple. So I think Purple is working on doing some type of prop house, but to the degree that you would really want to attend, but for financial reasons you wouldn't be able to, I think that could potentially be also a thing. And so I would love to see developers be able to come if that's the gap. So, pay attention there.
Cool. And then last operational thing, don't forget about the FC Devs chat that our channel that Dan mentioned. We moved our Telegram dev chat, which was getting pretty noisy, over to FC Devs. This actually feels like it's been working pretty well, at least from my perspective. I've been able to much more easily find questions and answer them. But if folks have used this and have thoughts or feelings, would love to hear about it. But if folks haven't used it, would encourage you to post more questions here that we can talk about.
One other strategy here, while the volume of casts are somewhat low, to the degree that you want to know about new casts, there's a little icon at the top with the bell, and if you add that, you'll just get a notification in your notifications feed in Warpcast every time there's a new cast. And so if it's too noisy, you're going to obviously do that, but to the degree that you kind of want that, and we may actually do a little bit of iteration here, where the idea is like top casters, for example, like so there's some bit of quality bar, actually the ones that get that versus others. So. But I would encourage people to try to drive as many of the questions around Farcaster as a protocol and development to that channel. I think the Farcaster channel, might end up being this weird catch-all that I would kind of start de-emphasizing a little bit and move to a little bit of a more narrow and high quality community. And so that's what I would say.
Great. That's it for Farcaster related stuff. We're going to switch into Warpcast updates. So first thing that we're thinking about, wanted to surface it to this community first, is sponsored signups. So right now, everyone goes to the signup flow, everyone hits the in-app purchase flow and has to pay the full amount to get into the app. It's been working decently well, but we see about 50% of people download the app, go through the onboarding, get to that screen, and then say, well, I don't know if I want to pay for this now, or run into issues actually triggering the in-app payment for a variety of reasons. And one of the experiments we want to run is, can we qualify and sponsor good users? i.e., if we see you get to that page and you have a verified wallet, verified phone number, verified email address, we know that you're not a spammer. Can Warpcast actually sponsor a few users to get through that initial hump to get into the application? So in the interest of driving DAO and QDAO, this is an experiment that we're going to run for a few weeks for new users, and we'll see how it goes. And we may keep doing it, or we may roll it back depending on how the results go. Cool. Next big thing that we've been working on is DCs, which Cassie has been driving with some support from Dan and Goksu as well. Cassie or Dan, do you guys want to give a quick update on the DC roadmap as you're thinking about it?
Sure, I'm happy to. High level, we have group DCs now. Getting a decent amount of usage. I think we have a bunch of things that we still need to go fix. So the clearer thing is adding images, the ability to do reactions and replies and app mentions. So basic table stakes features for any kind of like modern group messaging experience. I think the tough but true version of it is we could go spend a ton of time trying to make this decentralized. We could do a partial version where it's still centralized with Warpcast and build an SDK. The reality is it's not going to drive any amount of DAO to the protocol. And if we are laser focused on one thing in 2024 that Varun and I will continue to keep repeating to everyone is we are focused on growing DAO, quality DAO for the network by, multiple orders of magnitude, 100x. And in a world where we achieve that this year, we are going to be in a much better place where people are actually going to be able to build viable businesses outside of Warpcast on top of Farcaster. Potential for venture funding and all the things that I think the builders that are kind of looking to build in kind of decentralized social are hoping for. And I think it also gives the chance for Warpcast to kind of focus on, okay, we've figured out a way to sustainably grow. What are the other things that we can take that are working at the Warpcast level and work to fold into the protocol? And so I think if we made a mistake last year is we put a lot of resources from Warpcast side of things to get to credible neutrality, which I think was an important step for the protocol. But the reality is it didn't really drive QDAO. And I think if we could go back and change that, if we had spent maybe, twice as much effort on growing QDAO in 2023 and somehow cracked it then, I think developers would be happier, right? We'd be like, Warpcast API still exists. We would still have the work to go do. You'd have to still trust us, which you've had to trust us basically since the beginning of the protocol. But the reality is what people want, whether it's Abura or Supercast or Mod or any of these things is you want 100x DAO, right? Real DAO that you can actually go and build either a bootstrap business or a venture-backed business. And that's it. It doesn't matter otherwise. Otherwise, it's a science experiment. We are no different than the upteenth number of decentralized social protocols that have existed before. If we cannot build a sustainable user base that people can actually build businesses on top of, we're just never going to matter, right? Scale is what actually matters in terms of making this an impactful protocol in the world.
Dan, I think Greg had a comment. Don't DCs today discourage people to use other clients, in which case a centralized SDK might be a good middle ground? I have some thoughts, but you can go first.
Yeah, so let's go thing. The reason people don't use other clients is because they're not on mobile. I'll continue to repeat this. We have 80% usage of Warpcast is on mobile. So yes, there will be some power users who will want to use desktop. And I think that there is a place for desktop apps or web, but that works in a world where we have 100x DAO. Now you can actually build a web kind of meaningful pro tool, like kind of a TweetDeck. So when we start to have viable mobile apps that are actually driving usage, which there's a lot of work to go get a mobile app to be that kind of polished and ready to go, then I think we would be kind of more apt to kind of say, hey, should we prioritize maybe a little earlier some version of a kind of middle ground SDK? But I think the thing is that like DCs aren't driving net protocol growth right now. They are driving additional engagement, which I think is really good, right? We want to retain people and we want people using the protocol. But in terms of like, are people joining Farcaster through Warpcast for DCs? They're not. And so it will be this kind of thing where you as an app developer today could significantly boost your numbers, but we're talking about a total TAM that's too small to be really viable. And so I think where we want to be laser focused on is if we can 100x the overall TAM is a jargon, so total addressable market. If 100x the number of active users on the Farcaster protocol, it opens up a whole bunch more viable paths for different types of businesses and services because you just have so many more potential customers. The limiting factor for Farcaster's success right now is we just don't have enough people using it. Varun, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think so. Greg, going back to your point and just kind of answering it head on, like, don't DCs discourage people to use other clients? I think the short answer is yes. But the longer answer is building a client that is actually going to get people to switch over is very, very hard. Like, people have a very high bar for what they want in a social app. They want a native mobile application. They want push notifications. They want feeds. They want all of this stuff. And if you look at the amount of work Warpcast has had to put in to even get our 5,000 QDAO, it's been a team of 5+ like client-side folks working full-time for almost 3 years to get there. And the question is, who else is going to do that work right now if their share of the pie is, in the best case, hey, get 50% of what Warpcast has today, get 2,500 users? Not many teams are actually going to go and do that. And so, Dan and I will continue to say this. The number one reason people don't use other clients is because of lock-in or because of features or because of other things. It's because nobody is motivated to go and sink the resources to build a successful competitor to Warpcast without us actually having more users on the network. And that's going to be the number one thing that we want to make sure is solved for before we go and start decentralizing things. Because the place where I don't want to find us is having this amazing decentralized technology and no users and no app developers actually spending any time integrating it because, again, there are no users of the protocol.
I think one other thing, some of you are a little younger. So I grew up during the era of Twitter's third-party client era when there was no actual first-party client for Twitter. The reason that worked was because there was a massive amount of Twitter growth. So Twitter did all the growth, and then these clients benefited, and then there was no mobile client because mobile really wasn't a thing. But the whole, it's all predicated on actual user growth because the clients can only build a business if you actually hit 10, 100x the scale of where we are. And then you actually start to have a lot of viable new paths open for people. Otherwise, we're like, if we can't grow that 100x DAO, like Warpcast won't be a viable company. And so like we have to stay laser focused on actually driving the overall protocol. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
The thing that Dan and I do want to reiterate is I think there are a bunch of things that developers are building and creating that are actually insanely valuable for the network. Like, I mean, Greg, you built Searchcaster, you know this from first principles, but it is all the stuff, tools, utilities, apps that are laser focused on narrow but complementary use cases to Warpcast. These are the things that I think are going to be very successful in 2020, have been successful in 2023, will continue to be successful in 2024 and 2025, where we're not trying to build full client replacements, which are just a shit ton of work, but we're building power user tools, utilities, add-ons, and things like that that make the ecosystem better and that can build on and draw from the distribution that Warpcast brings today. In the same model that, like, Facebook apps work because you could plug into the distribution that Facebook had, but you're building something different that is complementary to it, not building like an alternate Facebook client. And then I think in the long run, if we're successful and we grow the user base and we have enough of a market for people, for a team of 5 to actually say, hey, let's go take a shot at building an alternate client, then I think we've earned the right to go and do those things. But I think if there's one thing that Dan and I were both wrong about in the early days, we thought that the network was going to have multiple clients on day one. And I think we grossly underestimated how much work has to go into building that and what kind of market potential needs to exist before someone is motivated enough to raise the money and build the team to go do that.
Just look at how many shortcomings Warpcast has, right? So like, if you think about like how much work we've put into these clients to get the DAO that we have, like our image support is bad. We don't have video. Like there's like a zillion other features that we can actually go build just to get to table stakes. And so I think like what I would focus people on is to Varun's point. One, there are a bunch of just like small utilities, like stuff that, Greg, I actually think has the kind of mentality of where the market is today outside of us significantly increasing the total number of QDAO on the protocol. And I think a second thing is with AuthKit, and I might just like kind of write a little blog post or kind of mock things up so people can understand this. Like, here's a really basic example. Someone could go build the Farcaster Stories client. Don't put any of the data on the protocol. Just like keep it super simple. It's like a CRUD web app, build the mobile app, and then use AuthKit. So you get your graph when you show up. So it's like almost like this like Web3 contact book. But the idea is you don't have any of the complexity of worrying about the protocol. And so like that kind of experimentation where you are trying a completely new thing, but you are bootstrapping off the existing graph and the distribution that you personally have as a member of the Farcaster community, I think those are going to be much more fruitful until we've gotten the overall protocol to somewhere on the order of about 100x from here, which at that point, you're going to have so many people using the actual core share infrastructure of the CAS that there is enough user base that you can actually go carve off a kind of like pro tool that people are going to be either willing to pay for or just a viable business on its own.
Cool. By the way, they've been roasting you in the peanut gallery, Dan. I don't know if we're going to take a few minutes to defend your honor or if we should move on.
I mean, come on, like I can take it.
Cool. Let me see if there's any actual questions. How will a calendar or event or game using sign-in with Farcaster notify a user that something has happened? So this version of sign-in with Farcaster, I think, is external only. It's kind of like, you know, when you go to a site and they're signed in with Google, it's purely auth. You're using that to log into that website, and it's sort of a one-directional flow. It is taking Farcaster data and giving it to the app, so the app can do useful things, but it is not a backward flow where data is coming back into Farcaster. That's phase one. I think phase two, I actually think it was DF that suggested this, but we've been kicking around ideas of like, how can you use Open Graph and other things so apps can push content back through images into Farcaster, like live dynamic content as things keep updating. We're very early in the thinking on this, but I know Horsefax has thought about this stuff. And so we might, over the next few weeks, hopefully by the time we have the next dev call, have some rough ideas or sketches on things that we can do here.
And Raipan, let me push back on this. If you build a mobile app, you get a user to install it, you have push notifications. You don't need DCs. So the idea is like the thing that I keep pushing people on is there is no mobile app that is in the App Store app. You know, Jam has since kind of moved on, I think, to different pastures that people are actively using. And the moment you actually have that, you now have a communication channel with users. This is why mobile is the reason all of the Web2 companies are only focused on mobile. Facebook is like something like 90% use on mobile. And so it's like, I'm going to continue to say it till I'm blue in the face, like build a mobile app, use AuthKit, and you can immediately have a direct relationship with all your users. And yes, DCs are a thing that people check in Warpcast, but they also check Telegram. They also check WhatsApp. The moment you have a mobile app, you have a new push notification channel for users. And anyone who tells you that users don't want push notifications, it's completely false. It's like a revealed preference. The reality is all social apps use push notifications. That's the growth mechanism. And so I really, really want to push people to don't say, oh, the reason I'm not able to do it is because Warpcast doesn't have DCs. That would be nice, yes. But the reality is people need to build mobile apps and use the same playbook that, you know, go follow Nikita Beer. Like he would give you that feedback of like, that is actually how you grow this stuff. And so I really, really want to shift the mentality around people is like mobile apps are the way to do it. I think Abora is a great example of this. Abora is a kind of like not just a feed, but it actually has different differentiated features in a mobile app. And so it's like I would encourage more people to pursue that path.
Yes, Farcaster app for high schoolers. Next on the roadmap. Cool. DF had a question on any thoughts on the FIP and metadata. DF, would you mind linking that here so I can just quickly bring it up for folks who are maybe not as familiar with that FIP?
While Varun's doing that, on DGen Woj, I mean, look, it's interesting. It's like by 2x the most engaged channel. I think we're thinking things through in terms of like, how do we make channels better? And obviously if things are working really well on DGen, it's like, what can we learn from that and then actually apply it to the channel's primitive? So that's kind of like my general view. Like, I don't think the existing community of Farcaster, if we rotate Warpcast into a like DGen client, is going to be happy with that in terms of, I think it is a part of the community. And that's the beauty of channels, is it's created an area that people who want to talk about that topic can really go deep on that topic. And people who don't want to be part of that don't have to. And it's like coexists versus if we take the pre-channel world, I don't think that would have ever emerged. And I think, you know, the old version of Farcaster being one big group chat, like it doesn't scale without channels. And so that's actually the big insight there is like, how can we do whatever's working well for DGen and actually apply it to other channels? I would love to see 10 more, 100 more channels as engaged as DGen.
Okay, rotating back to DF's question about the metadata spec, which I kind of alluded to. TLDR, it's the idea of how do apps outside of Farcaster embed stuff into metadata to get things back into Farcast or into Warpcast and other clients in a very easy, compatible way, so clients don't have to do a lot of work and other apps can push stuff in. So high level, I like this direction, DF. I think this actually sparked a bunch of interesting conversations on our side. We haven't really had the headspace to explore it since the break, but we started thinking about actually thinking about it in the shower this morning. So we'll come back to you with like more concrete thoughts maybe by the next dev call once we've had some time to digest. But I know Horsefax has talked about spiking on the polls app and has some related ideas that he wants to work on. So I think we'll kind of start with like building prototypes and seeing what feels right and what feels easy for devs, and then kind of come back and comment on the spec once we have higher conviction on how it works. Bill's question on polls. Yeah, we want to. It's honestly like kind of in the middle section of our roadmap, like lower down, but we think it's like an obvious, like everyone's going to use polls once they're live. One of the things on our roadmap is to currently think about what is the progression from shipping a centralized poll to actually making it decentralized and working on other clients. The sort of pure decentralized ways we can go introduce a new data type at the hubs, make that upgrade, ship it, and then every client would have to upgrade it. The hacky decentralized version is, build a way such that the poll results render as like an image, and that image is attached and updated to the cast through open data. So any client, basically, if you're just scraping open data, you get poll results for free, which makes it super lightweight and compatible without having to go support a new protocol type. So thinking about what the right modality is to ship the first version of polls using that.
Yeah, the other thing is, and maybe I come across as too harsh before, I think, we have Horsefax and Sanjay who are kind of like focused on the protocol, like from a kind of how can we put things in primitives, and obviously we can think through that stuff from a Warpcast perspective. But if I can leave everyone with one message, it's like, we're trying to bring you 100x Q down. Like, we want to enable people to actually go build viable businesses in all different types and like manners. So that's where you're seeing the like storage fee change, like Warpcast sponsored signups, trying to figure the thing out that actually gets this to significant scale. And I would say, like, if you want to be brutally honest, it's like Blue Sky actually has a decent number of users in terms of like a decentralized protocol that actually has more scale than we have. And so I think we should definitely be able to be at that scale before we worry about getting to kind of like Web 2 scale.
Yep. Any new usage for Warps? Question from Manan. Not in the next 2 weeks, though we're always kicking around new ideas, and minting cast being one of the things that are on our backlog. So expect more stuff, but not in the very, very short-term future. Okay, cool. Coming back to Warpcast updates, one last item. Akshan, I don't believe he's here. Let me quickly check the attendee list. Okay, he couldn't make it, but the quick update is we've actually been working really hard to make it as easy as possible for folks to invite their communities. So there's a new invite dialog on Warpcast where if you go, we make it super easy to one-click share an invite link into, whoop, that's a bug. One-click share an invite link into Telegram. Live demo is always the worst. The logout bug, I got it to reproduce. This is great. Everyone's been complaining about this and it's never happened to me. Cool. Anyways, we need to go, are trying to make invites as easy as possible. So both on mobile and on desktop, click the invite button. You will get like a few short links, one click button, and you can immediately share the link to your community, and people clicking on that will sign up and you get credit for the invite. Best part is every time someone signs up with your invite link, you get 50 warps, they get 50 warps as they join the network. Okay, we're going to continue making invites as easy and as frictionless as possible for you to onboard your communities. We think it's like the #1 way to keep growing the network is word of mouth. So expect more on this from us soon. All right, cool. Thank you all for coming today. There's been so much stuff happening that I haven't actually maintained my usual shout out lists, but special thanks to everyone who makes this dev call, especially folks in Europe and other time zones for whom this is very late. We always appreciate you logging on and giving us your feedback and thoughts, and appreciate all the discussion. Until next time.